Hi, my name is Jess. I'm a senior cybersecurity executive here at UpGuard. I'm very excited to welcome you to this panel discussion where we will be diving into the topic of selecting and onboarding a third-party risk management tool. Today, I have with me Steve from Colorado State University, Ziggy from Hendrickson, and Colby from town of Danvers. If you're watching this live today, please feel free to join the conversation by adding your comments and questions in the chat, and we will get to them towards the end. So starting off, I'd just like to get a quick introduction from each of you. So please tell us about yourself, your current role, and how long you have used UpGuard. So Steve, let's start with you.
Sure, thanks, Jess. Hi, everybody. I'm Steve Lovaas. I'm the Chief Information Security Officer for Colorado State University, both the main campus and the CSU system across the state. Been there for about 18 years, and I've been a user of UpGuard for the last 3 years.
Great. Ziggy?
Sure. Ziggy Kowalski. I work for the Hendrickson Corporation. We manufacture suspensions for trailers and trucks that you see out on the road. I've been in IT for about 20 years, started off in infrastructure, and for about the last 10, I've been in security. We've been using UpGuard for about a year and a half. We take care of, my team and I take care of everything security related for the business and just make sure we protect against the bad guys. Colby?
Yeah, I'm Colby Cousens. I'm a local government IT director, and I'm also a cybersecurity counselor on a council for the Homeland Security Northeast region in Massachusetts. I've been in Danvers for about 7 years, but we just started using UpGuard about a year ago. And it's been great so far.
Great to hear. Well, thank you guys. It's great to have you on. We really appreciate the time. So today's conversation, just wanted to start by asking, why were you looking for a third-party risk management tool like this in the first place? Steve, do you want to take it away first?
Sure, I'd be happy to. The desire actually initially grew out of wanting to see our own public-facing risk footprint. And as we got comfortable with that, we started coming to terms with how we were going to have a similar level of comfort with the public-facing risk of our suppliers, our vendors, our partners. And so it sort of grew organically. And then, of course, more recently with the spate of third-party compromises, it was a topic that got more discussion around the boardroom table and eventually ended up in an audit about what are we doing for third-party risk management.
Yeah, ours is a little bit different, Steve. We approached it. We had a very manual approach that we were going through with a massive Excel sheet with like 200 vendors on it that our purchasing department was using to really try to get the critical vendors and see where their cyber programs were auditing, and it would take a year, right? So like when you finished one, you would be, it would already be out of date. So when they approached me and said, "Hey, let's restart that project," I was newer at the company. I said, "We cannot do that again. That's not a very manual approach, and it's not really going to work out." So we started looking at different tools out there and said, "Hey, there's some the things have changed out there. There's a lot of automation that we can use and streamline this process," and that's how we got started.
Yeah, so for us, I guess a little bit of a different story. It was a Homeland Security initiative. The region that we have is 85 communities, and we wanted to get an idea of their security posture. We started with survey-based assessments, but the information we were getting, we weren't confident in, so we really went looking for a technical tool to give us some real metrics and good data on at least what the attack surface looks like of a given municipality to get started,
Yeah. Wonderful. Great. Well, you all had a little bit of a different approach to your decision-making process when selecting a tool. So wanted to dive into that a bit. Steve, can you start with kind of your process, who was involved, things like that?
Sure. So again, we started off fairly low key with organic growth. And so what that looked like early on was I just picked, not quite at random, but picked from the various available risk rating companies and figured I'd try one for a year or two, see how it went. Ended up replacing it with another one to try it for a year. And third time's a charm. I landed with UpGuard on the third try, which seemed to provide all of the things that the first two were lacking. So I didn't have a formal RFP process or a formal evaluation. It was more of trying the tools that might work for a need that I had as a security chief, and then once I was comfortable with the tool that we landed on, then bringing other operational areas into using it more. So for me, it was a gradual process. I know a lot of people have a much more aggressive and formal way of looking at acquiring a tool, and certainly we have more formal ways of acquiring a lot of software. But in this case, I had the luxury of looking around the market a little bit and exploring and figuring out which features were most relevant and valuable for us, and which tool would give the best experience for those.
Yeah, Steve, our process was a little bit more formal, which obviously we got to the same conclusion. So it works in many different ways. We did actually, I went and looked at like Gartner and said, who do you guys suggest? And it was pretty, new out there for them. So I did find 5 different vendors that we ended up looking at. And I met with our purchasing team and asked them what was important to them, talked to my team and said, what's important to you? So things, and then we came up with like buckets of like what was important. Like ease of administration was most important to us as a team. We didn't want to be spending too much time in the tool. And when we did, we wanted it to be intuitive. We didn't want to have to, read a manual or contact support or anything like that. We just wanted it to be easy. We also were going to have non-technical people in the tool. So we knew that it had to be super easy because they weren't IT people. So they weren't going to just pick it up right away. So that was really important to us. Obviously cost, ease of implementation, access to business access to the data. That was really important to us too. So really that was kind of our idea of like, okay, let's wait this out, see what's important, look at all the tools. They all were pretty easy to get started with. But then we landed on UpGuard and we've been happy with it since. Colby, anything different from you?
Yeah, it was a little different for me. I went to a convention. I went to Secure World in Boston, and I kind of knew what I was looking for, and I found it right away. I found UpGuard. They were the first ones I found, and I said, this is great. This is exactly what I was looking for, but let me not just fire on the first one that I found. So we did some more research. Actually, UpGuard guided me. They had a list of competitors on their website. So I went through that list of competitors. We did several trials. I leveraged my whole team to evaluate it. And we all unanimously agreed on UpGuard for a variety of reasons that spoke to different members of my team. I had the reasons I liked it, and they had the reasons they liked it as well. So I'd say it's pretty comprehensive and covers a lot of bases.
Yeah, great. Well, would love to dive into a little bit deeper, just in terms of, what did check off your boxes? What did your criteria look like in regards to choosing which tool you went with?
Yes.
Sure. Oh, go ahead, Colby.
Yeah, I don't know who wants to go. So, a big thing for us was discovery, the ability to discover assets. And of the tools we tried, UpGuard did a much better discovery process, very quickly discovered more assets than some of the other tools we're using. Very easy to work with, very intuitive. You could just jump into the product and get a feel for it. And the reporting is so clean and nice, and it's segmented into those board level reports that ultimately that's where the information needs to go, and it's got to be digestible for them. And so that ability, plenty of technical reports for us that are very effective, but that ability to communicate up the chain effectively with visuals and representing data was great for us.
Yeah, you said the discovery was nice. I think, that also was nice for us too, but also the ability, as I'm sure you would agree, the rescanning feature of not having to wait a considerable amount of time for a change to be caught by the system. So for us, really, the ability to assign a remediation or assign a finding to somebody either outside the company or internal, as Steve was talking about, like using it internally, we did that too. And then have them, be able to rescan it and see that it's fixed rather than playing the middleman game over and over again. Like, hey, is it fixed? Or having to wait 24 hours. That it shortened the amount of time that we thought we were going to have to, I didn't even expect that the tool would be that good, would be shorten the time to remediate actual issues. So we were able to remediate more, which was I don't know if anybody else is doing that. They surely weren't at the time that I was looking at the tool. So I don't know, Steve, if you've liked that part of the tool also.
Yeah, I'd certainly echo the comments about the intuitive nature of the interface and the reports for board consumption. I generally don't take canned vendor reports to the board because they're rarely either useful or the right level of detail and complexity. The reports, though, the board formatted reports in UpGuard are actually really useful and speak to people who know about risk and don't know a heck of a lot about technology. So that's been very helpful. And yes, I agree. We've used the breach site feature, the internal scan for ourselves extensively over the years that we've had UpGuard. And what that does for us, especially since with few exceptions, we're actually larger than many of our vendor suppliers. So some of the complexity of our own network is actually more difficult to deal with than some of the things that our vendors are exposing. But having the experience as an internal customer in assessing the accuracy of a finding, assessing the recommendation for resolving it that's contained in the remediation, and having experience working through what we see has been really helpful in terms of then going to a vendor and saying, okay, we see these 8 things on an UpGuard scan. We're pretty confident that they're right. And these 2 up at the top that are flagged critical, could you please look at those right now? Because these tend not to be false positives, at least in our experience. So that's been a very helpful feature. And the one extra element I'd say really weighed heavily in deciding that UpGuard was the good place to land was the responsiveness of the online support. It's not just that I can click a button and do a rescan. It's that I can click a help button and be chatting with someone almost immediately, and they are almost universally able to directly answer my question or quickly find someone who can. So it's been a very good experience with online help as well.
Yeah, I agree with that, Steve. We didn't test the support a lot during the POC, but it's something that I was like, this is probably the best support that I've ever received. That people are friendly, they get back to you right away. And, it's, hey, I don't understand. You can ask them anything. I don't understand this finding, and they'll break it down to you. And if they don't know the answer, they'll go to the engineering team, and they're really receptive to getting feedback, which has been awesome. So I agree with that wholeheartedly. The other thing too that you mentioned that I was thinking about was like the internal use of the tool. For anybody listening to this, one thing is that we really, like day one, you can start remediating, which like you don't have to like hook this up to like a ticketing system or anything. It's a full-on system that you can start using day one to assign a task to somebody or remediation to somebody and have them go in and start using the tool. I was really kind of surprised at how easy it is to use to get people into it internally. And hey, it's a score, so everybody likes seeing that score increase over time. So it almost gamifies it to some degree too. If you want to have people compete about how high they can get the overall score.
Yeah, great. That's great to hear based on, the support and how much you guys are enjoying the tool. Another question here for you. Based on the criteria that you did set, how did you decide in regards to testing out other options?
So since I'm apparently the spokesperson for a gradual informal approach, I didn't have a list of criteria to check off yes or no. It was an organic experience that grew into something I could rely on. Were I to do it again, I would probably list the various things I talked about and have my team kick the tires, but my team was much smaller when I started this. And so it was on me to just make the decision.
Yeah. Now, Ziggy, I know that you had a more in-depth process based on your criteria. Could you walk us through that a little bit?
Yeah, as I was kind of talking about earlier, when we came up with those buckets of like categories that we wanted to take a look at, ease of administration, implementation costs, and so on and so forth. We really, we have a system here we like to use where we rate quantitatively, each vendor 1 through 5, with 5 being the best, and then based on the weight, we get a different score on the different tools that we use. But one of the other categories I didn't mention was the questionnaires. So, we really wanted to integrate questionnaires without having going outside the tool or having it being a bolt-on. So that's something, again, UpGuard really scored high on, and also something that actually like kind of revolutionized a process that we were doing for onboarding remote access people that wanted remote access to our tool. So prior, we had pretty manual. Well, it was a very manual process to try to onboard a specific vendor onto our environment to do a security check. So now through using, the scoring system, plus also sending them a questionnaire and having that count towards the score, we are able to turn these things around a lot quicker for providing remote access. But back to the scoring kind of mechanism that we used. Obviously, we landed on UpGuard, but just try. That's the kind of the process that we do when we're trying to make a slightly bigger decision in a short amount of time.
Great, thank you. Colby, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, really for me, having found UpGuard first, they were my baseline for everything I compared. And, does it do it as well as UpGuard? And I think that's kind of the marketing design of the company. And I fell into it, but it worked. Everywhere else I looked, there was just something missing. That was simple and easy in UpGuard. So, yeah, we looked around, but we came back to the first product we encountered. So we got lucky there.
Yeah, great. So, Colby, let's start with you. How was your onboarding process?
The onboarding process was really simple. I mean, we set up a trial and experimented with it a little bit. And then basically I sat down in a weekend and plugged in 150 domains, and I was up and running, and I had all kinds of scores and reporting and correlations I could do. I could group them into regions. It was really easy to move around in the product. So I didn't have to reach out for any help at all. Glad to know that the support team is fantastic. But I just kind of worked through it and got up and running. We have a regular call with our customer service team, and any questions I had there, I asked. But very impressed with the onboarding process and the fact that I was able to build out my whole trial and understand the product and really realize the value of it. And that environment just became my production environment. So I didn't have to recreate my proof of concept. It all just flowed right into my purchase.
Great. Ziggy?
Yeah, I had the same exact experience. The only thing I'd add is we did add single sign-on soon after we signed. So, that made it even more seamless that we were able to use our Azure Active Directory sign-in so that we were able to get access. And then subsequently, I think a testament to the tool is how much training you have to do internally, which we really didn't have to do much at all. It was that intuitive. So the onboarding process, when you're testing it just with a couple people, and then you start bringing other people in the tool, we didn't have to have training sessions or anything like that. We just said, just go into it. It's that easy.
Yeah, I found it very intuitive, but I also appreciated even years after the initial purchase, just recently, I brought on another person who's going to be helping out with the core administration of the site, as well as some of the vendor interactions and internal work. And UpGuard was willing to just at the drop of a hat add another scheduled training session to make sure the new person was comfortable, and that went very easily.
Nice.
They did the same thing for me, Steve, because I got some grant funding and hired a couple of interns to help me with my project, and they folded them in to one of our meetings and gave them a whole training session on it just to bring them up to speed. So seems like a consistent approach of theirs.
Yeah, it's great to hear you guys like our support team. That's really awesome to hear. So now that you've all used the tool for a little while, is there anything that you use it for that you didn't anticipate using it for? Are there any improvements you'd like to see? Colby, do you want to take it away?
Yeah, I mean, originally I wanted to look at others, and I assumed that my own environment was pretty secure, but I couldn't resist taking a look, and man, there was some shadow IT stuff that I didn't realize was out there. People had stood up things that tied back to our community from the internet that I didn't know about. So really glad to have that insight internal to the organization. And then, being able to scan all of the communities in a region and sort and aggregate, what's the most common vulnerability, what's the most critical vulnerability, and how often are we seeing that? A lot of great data. And then if you get into the fourth party risk, you're starting to deal with your vendors' third party relationships and what they're exposed to. And for us, because our initial target is another municipality, it's showing us what vendors they're using. And we got a lot of strategic information on who's using what vendor is most common in the state of Massachusetts in terms of IT. And this leads to all kinds of implications about collaborative purchasing. If we can see everyone in the entire region is using this one vendor, well, maybe we can aggregate some of our purchasing power and realize an advantage to that. So that type of strategic data I didn't expect to get out of the vulnerability platform, but it's there.
So I was anticipating that we would get good information about our own public-facing services. One unexpected bonus is when we started to look at strengthening our DMARC posture for email verification. Unlike some of the services that will give you an unending stream of alerts and you have to sort through everything, it's pretty easy in UpGuard to have a quick sorted list of where things might be missing, where policy might not be strong enough. So that was a very useful tool that I didn't anticipate being helpful. And then a feature that is new that I look forward to using with our upgrade that's just going through for another year is the addition of the fourth party feature, fourth party risk to get at the things like the MOVEit breach that affected so many of us. What software are our vendors using? So yeah, that's going to be great.
Yeah, for me, pretty much the same thing. And as I was saying earlier, we started looking at the tool as how it can automate some of the other processes that we were doing. Like I said, with doing people who wanted remote access to our environment. So taking a very manual approach and actually enhancing it and automating it a lot faster. That was something that we didn't go into it thinking we were going to do, but quickly became one of the main uses of the tool that my team uses. So it's been pleasant surprise.
So Ziggy, if I understand that correct, you're vetting third parties that want remote access to your system?
Yes, exactly.
And then you must have like a minimum score or something like that they have to meet?
Yeah. Yep. And we look for red flags, like a pretty blatant item. So since the tool is doing, looking at public information, we use the house analogy and the yard, right? This is looking at the yard. And if the yard is really dirty, we should probably come inside and look at the house, right? So really, instead of just going straight into the house and making it a science project, we're going to look at the yard first and say, hey, if the yard's pretty clean or immaculate, you know what, we're going to maybe not have to send them the 300 questionnaire that we normally do. So that's the approach that we've used, and that's how it saved us a lot of time.
Great, guys. All great points. Thank you for sharing. So last question before we hop into the Q&A. How do you calculate the ROI of the UpGuard tool? Ziggy, do you want to start?
Sure. So for me, it's pretty simple. It's, is it saving us time versus the manual approach that I've been talking a lot about, right? It's not that we have exact KPIs and all the stuff that we've analyzed it. I know that our process to actually select it was pretty quantitative, but it's just very apparent that the ROI of how we've taken manual process and automated or turned them into using the tool is just clear as day to me. So I can't give you a specific calculation, but I know on the surface, and everybody that hears me talk about it and has used the tool knows that it is very apparent that the tool is doing. It's helped us a lot.
I'd echo what Ziggy said. Calculating an actual numeric ROI in security is always a challenge because how much does it cost if the breach isn't an obvious ransomware, but just something that happens? Well, there's staff time and we're doing a lot of different things, so it's not always easy to give a number. But I'd say UpGuard is less expensive than at least one of the competitors who didn't do as satisfying a job. So that feels like a positive movement. And it continues to provide, I would say, more insight than an equivalent amount of money I would spend on staffing to go out and harvest this kind of information manually. So I think it's a win.
Yeah, I'd piggyback on what Steve said. I have plenty of staffing that's reviewing this stuff, but without the tool, they're not seeing it. And for us, our ROI discussion was kind of around how much could we improve the security posture of the region, the Northeast Homeland Security region of Massachusetts. So that's an 85 community region. We did a lot of scanning, a lot of outreach. We did 15-minute consults with IT directors and organizational leadership. We had a goal of moving the average score of all 85 communities by at least 10% in a positive direction. We are currently over 9%, but not quite at 10. We're almost there. So we're getting close. When we hit that goal, we want to write a white paper about our experience and the type of engagement that we encountered with people and the reactions they had, and ultimately improving the security posture of a region by a reasonable amount over time.
Great. Well, I look forward to that white paper, Colby. That's exciting.
Yeah, thank you.
So let's jump into the Q&A now from our viewers. So if you are watching live right now and you do have a question for the panelists, please feel free to share them in the chat. But in the meantime, we are going to start with the ones we already have. So one question here: how large are the panelist security teams? Steve, do you want to start?
Sure. I head up a department of about a dozen, split half and half between identity and access management and security. So 6 dedicated security people underneath me for the whole roughly 50,000 users. And so still feels like we're strapped a little bit, but it's moving in the right direction.
For us, we have about 4,000 to 5,000 users, and we have 2 security people plus me, so 3 total.
Yeah, we have about 1,000 users, and we have 5 people that work on security. It's not the only thing they work on, but there's a component of security to everybody's job at this point.
Yeah.
Great, thank you guys. So another question: in your experience, how do vendors who aren't using UpGuard themselves react when you trigger a remediation activity to them as part of a vendor assessment? I
can take that one if you don't mind. So we actually, the one thing we did create outside of the UpGuard portal, well, first and foremost, we branded everything, right? Which is nice that the tool allows you to do that. So logo, email address, so everything was going to be delivered to the vendor in a predictable way. And we just created I think it's a 1 or 2 pager, or actually like a 1 pager that we send ahead of time. It says, hey, by the way, we know that you're, in my instance, where you're asking for remote access to our environment. You expect to see an email that looks like this with a questionnaire, so that we actually tell them what they're supposed to see prior to it. So yeah, I think if you just blindly send it out, that's probably not a good approach. So that's how we approach it. I don't know if you guys do anything differently.
I think I may adopt that approach.
Yeah, we're very sensitive to sending out requests that smell a lot like phishing. Even our own internal users who ought to know that we're using this tool sometimes forget and push back. Why are you sending us this thing? Or is this legit? Is this real? So yes, Ziggy, I think that's critical to prepare people in advance for a tool that they may not have seen before. But once we let them know that it's coming, there never seems to be any issue of difficulty dealing with the content or responding to what's being asked.
Yeah, the other nice option is you can always export results to PDF and send it to them ahead of time so that they know what they're going to see, and then assign them a remediation test. We've done that too.
Awesome. So how has UpGuard improved your threat detection and response times since implementing?
I mean, from our perspective, I think Steve was saying earlier, or Colby was talking about the visibility. Like sometimes you just don't know what you don't know. So like, it's just open up our eyes. So we have a little bit more information if maybe a particular vendor had some sort of incident that we need to know about, or is their scores dropping, or they've introduced something that we need to be aware of, and they're a critical vendor of ours. So I don't know that it's actually cut down on actual threat detection time, but it's actually helped provide more information about what's going on in our environment with our critical vendors.
Yeah, I would agree. It's more about the insight and the proactive work you can do. I realized how blind I was to a lot of things going on in my environment, and being able to shine a light on that stuff. It created a lot of work for us, but stuff that needed to be done that were open risks for us without us being aware of them.
Yeah, I'd say that the sense in which it improved our speed of reaction is about triangulating multiple data points when we hear that something is a threat. We can quickly check with UpGuard. A, this vendor seems to have a dirty front yard, if you will, and B, it's been mentioned in some of the alerts, and sure enough, we really ought to jump on that, as opposed to just, I love many of our rather generic threat notification programs, but they're often pretty noisy. So this is a nice extra angle to attack that information from.
Well, and like you were talking about, Steve, with the move it information, if the whole industry could get to that point too, where you can get to the point where you can identify those vendors quickly that maybe have that particular tool and start working with them to remediate, that's really going to be a game changer.
Yeah.
Great, guys. So another question here. Do each of you have a documented TPRM program that is available to all relevant stakeholders in your respective organizations? And if so, how was it getting said program up and going, specifically with regard to the various business units and their roles and responsibilities?
I'll jump into that because I mentioned our size, and higher ed in the US is typically highly distributed in responsibility and the way we deal with IT and business issues. And so, yes, we have the beginnings of a documented third-party risk management program. There are rules that people need to attend to as they're bringing up new vendor relations, and UpGuard plays a key role in evaluating new requests and setting up monitoring for long-term relationships. Not perfect yet, not completely rolled out yet, because we are a big ship and it takes us a while to make a turn.
Yeah, we're in the same boat, Steve. Wouldn't add much there. I don't know about you, Colby.
Yeah, similar. We have the tool that we want to build around now, but we don't have the formalization yet that we will need.
Awesome, thank you. So how many vendors are you monitoring within UpGuard? And are you adding all those vendors to UpGuard just in case, or do you have a criteria that a vendor needs to meet before they are going to be monitored?
That's a good question. We have somewhat more than 100 that we monitor. It's nowhere near our total number of third-party vendors. We've made an attempt to identify the most impactful, and we keep an eye on that in terms of amounts in procurement reports and criticality of data that vendors have access to, or those that have remote access into systems on our network. So that's a moving target, and we try to keep it relevant and current. And we We do add some during the initial evaluation phase before we have made a decision. If someone just mentions that they're thinking about a vendor we haven't heard of, we'll pop that in the list and just see how it goes, so we can give an informal reply of, yeah, that seems reasonable to at least dig further into.
Yeah, we have about 200. We have a couple, like Steve said, that we just leave floating out there that we'll add a company in here or there if we're just trying to get some information about it, but it's not like a long-term strategic one. But out of the 200, we do make sure that all those the people that have remote access to our environment are in there all the time. And then since we're just working with our purchasing team, it's really the tier one suppliers that we work with that that are critical to our manufacturing process, that we want to make sure that we maintain, an understanding of where they are in a cybersecurity sense. So that's where our 200 goes to.
Yeah, we're monitoring about 150. Most of those are municipalities, and what we're trying to do is identify the most common and the most critical vulnerabilities, and build programs to inform people why they're important and how to address them. So that's kind of what we're running with. It's been effective so far, but how it is getting engagement from people can be a struggle sometimes.
Now, Ziggy, just a question for you. Is your organization using UpGuard to send and receive questionnaires for global suppliers and vendors, or is it just specific to the US?
It's global. So anything that's critical, or, we use the questionnaires, like I said, a lot for the remote access. So we've sent it to people in the UK and Australia and all over the world. So it has worked well.
Awesome. Well, what is a piece of advice you guys want to leave the reviewers with? We are towards the end of our session.
I think the easy one is, doing a proof of concept. It couldn't be any easier. And dealing with the UpGuard team couldn't have been easier too. Pleasant people to work with. Support is out there. And use it at least to look at your own score, as I think all of us have said. It's always eye-opening. Hopefully you don't find anything too eye-opening that makes you run out the room and start yelling at people. But you should at least know what your score is, because somebody else probably is, and they're going to be looking at you. So get a jump start on it.
Yeah, I would say the same thing. The trial is excellent, and it really opens your eyes. You can immediately see how easy it is to move around. The trial is not confusing. You pick it up right away, and you recognize its value right away. So yeah, give it a try.
I guess my advice, and I'll tie into the last question that I saw in the chat, was be aware of some of the more advanced features that are waiting for you down the road. It's easy to get started, easy to get an initial score, and there are some more advanced things you can do, like the automated questionnaire fill-ins using AI. We haven't started that, but it's on the roadmap, and I think that'll help us a lot in terms of staff time, resources. So I'm looking forward to that.
Wonderful. Now, Ziggy or Colby, have either of you moved on to using the AI questionnaire fill-ins?
I have not, actually not too aware of that, but we do one of the, I don't know if this is the same feature, but the one that, if you've answered the questionnaire before or whatever, like you could still import the answers from another questionnaire. I don't know if that's what we're talking about. Colby, are you aware of that feature?
I saw an announcement about that feature, but I haven't had a chance to dig into it yet. It does sound interesting.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, next time we can chat about all of that.
Yeah.
You guys, thank you so much for hopping on. Thank you for your time. Ziggy, Steve, Colby, you were great to have. It's been a pleasure to chat with you. Thank you to everybody who's watching live today and just watching in general. So we hope to see you again at the next summit in March. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
you.